everybody. Welcome, welcome. What an absolute honor it is to see you all here tonight. Guys, give yourself a round of applause just for turning up. There you go. So we're in the beautiful, iconic St Kilda Shore, and I want to thank Robert Glasman for opening up his doors, his heart, his soul, and your community. It's a wonderful community, and it's wonderful to be housed over here. And we want to welcome you all to this great event, co-hosted by J United, which you're going to hear all about in 1 minute, which is an incredible organization doing great work, sadly, since October 7. Our panelists are more than welcome to come on up. Make them feel welcome, give them a bit of love, come on. Yeah. They have never felt like superstars like they have just now. I mean, the rock star welcome that they're receiving, wherever you're comfortable. Dan, you're out of here. So for those who don't know, my name is Moshe Khan, and I am the proud director of YJP, Young Jewish Professional. Tonight, we've definitely got the young. That's a joke. Thank you. Not a joke. Not a joke. The young are laughing. Still getting a reject. It's all good. Tonight we've got the young, we've got the Jewish, we've got the professional. You know what we have tonight? We've got the soul of the community. We've got each and every single one of you that care about this community. And that's what we're about. Tonight we're about inspiring each other, learning to bring out the best. On this Shabbat we're going to read Ki Tzeitzei, which means when you go out. Every single one of us, it's probably the most appropriate message for tonight's talk, tonight's panel, is that every single one of us, sadly, can't have the comfort to decide to stay at home. We need to go out there, going out there in our day and ages on social media, and be proactive. Share the message of hope, of love, of positivity, and the message that we value life beyond anything else. I wanted to share with you that today we led a small group to visit the Melbourne Holocaust Museum. And our guide was talking about her father, who's a Holocaust survivor, and something that she said that truly, truly touched me. She said, my father went through the greatest atrocities, but the only message he ever taught us was there is no place for hate and only love. Only love will succeed ultimately. So my friends, tonight is a place of love. Tonight we're a place where we're coming together, be proactive, and thank you all for coming out. I also want to thank, sitting here in the front row, a man that is always behind the camera, but always does such incredible work, Brian Berger. Give him a round of applause. There's so much work into YJP. Thank you, Brian. We love you, and enjoy tonight's evening. I'm now going to be inviting, are you ready? Okay, you're going to introduce our incredible organization. So guys, that's it for me. Simone, all yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Simone Wine, and I'm the co-founder of J United, a grassroots movement born out of the tragic events of October 7. What began as a Facebook group to support our Jewish community has evolved into a powerful platform for action. Through our WhatsApp group, we've mobilised people for social media campaigns, sticker clean-up patrols, protests, events, rallies and vigils, all aimed at uniting our community and fighting anti-Semitism. Tonight was organised along with Brian from Young Jewish Professionals, a group who connects professionals through business, education and social events. We are thrilled to welcome you to what promises to be an inspiring and thought-provoking event. A special thank you to Rabbi Glassman and St Kilda Shul for providing this hall and making tonight possible. And of course, a quick reminder to please turn your phones to silent so we can stay focused on the important insights that we'll be hearing tonight. The events of October 7 left our community shaken. And since then, anti-Semitism has surged both locally and globally. Social media, which could have been a unifying force, has instead become a platform for hatred. Platforms like Instagram, X, Facebook and LinkedIn have seen a disturbing rise in anti-Semitic content. A report has shown that anti-Semitic posts surged by 500% on X after October 7. Holocaust denial, calls for violence against Jews, and conspiracy theories have been spreading unchecked. And as Alon Levy recently reminded us at an event in Melbourne, the soldiers in Israel are fighting a war they didn't ask for, but one they must win. And here we're fighting a different kind of war, one that's online against the lies, hatreds and anti-Semitism. This is a fight we can't afford to lose, and that's why we're here tonight. We are honoured to have 4 panellists who embody the spirit of Chutzpah, each one bringing a unique perspective and has made significant strides in advocacy and influence, proving there are many ways to fight the same battle. Keren Zelwer is a speech therapist, a mother of 3 and a passionate advocate for disability inclusion, gender equality and Israel. She's a member of the Advocacy Committee for the National Council of Jewish Women and has her articles published in Mamma Mia, The Australian and The Age. Zara Cooper, better known as Clammy Fraud, is a former corporate lawyer and CEO of a global footwear company. After experiencing online harassment, Zara founded Digital Defence, an organisation dedicated to improving the online safety and advocacy in Australia. Marnie Perlstein started her career in corporate PR and transitioned into Jewish education. Since October 7, her social media following skyrocketed from 1,000 to 35,000, making her a leading voice in the fight against anti-Semitism online. Dan Monheit is the founder and CEO of Hard Hat, Australia's top behavioural science and marketing agency. His book, The Why, is a bestseller in marketing and consumer behaviour, and he'll be sharing his expertise on influencing people using science, not magic.
And magic. A little bit of Jewish magic.
And much like tonight's panellists, Jackie and I, co-founders of J United, have very different perspectives. This is Jackie, our moderator tonight. But despite our differences, where I take a pragmatic, realistic approach, she believes that people are inherently good and always seeks to find common ground. We debate all the time. Jackie believes in resolving conflict through dialogue, and I believe in fighting the good fight where necessary. But despite that, we always come together to advocate for Israel and the Jewish people, and that's what tonight's about. Recognising that we may have different approaches, but our goal is the same. Each panellist brings their own unique perspective, and through dialogue and action we can work together to push back against hatred. So, my co-founder Jackie Maisner, who has over 25 years of experience in education and always championed diversity and inclusion, will bring you insight, compassion and a deep understanding of and finding common ground, and I'm confident she'll lead tonight's discussion brilliantly. After the panel discussion, we'll have a 30-minute Q&A. So if you have any questions, jot them down onto your phone. Please keep them brief so we can get through as many as possible. And I'll hand you over to Jackie.
Okay, welcome. I'm thrilled to be here as your moderator for tonight's discussion, and I'm really looking forward to learning from our incredible panellists. Like many Jewish women my age, my social media presence used to be only about sharing funny memes or self-deprecating memes, embarrassing pictures of my kids or snapshots of my Seder table. But since October 7th, my feed has taken a different turn. I found myself following people like our guests tonight, quietly admiring their dedication, eloquence and the unique ways they've been amplifying Jewish voices during such a difficult and traumatic time for our community. So, let's dive right in, shall we? Simone has given me strict instructions to fetch out as much wisdom as possible from our wonderful guests this evening, and there's so much to discuss with so little time. Okay, we'll start with Marnie, Keren and Zara. Before we get into more focused questions, we'd love to hear more about what inspired you to start your journey. As Simon Sinek says, start with the why. What motivated you to take action and dedicate yourself to the cause? What was the driving force behind your decision to get involved? Hearing your story will provide some valuable context and inspiration for our discussion tonight. So, move on with you.
Well, I had been working in advocacy way before October 7, but I was not a front-facing advocate. I was working on programs, and I realised around 2021 that we had a growing problem in Australia and globally after the conflict in Israel. Things really took a negative turn online, and it became very ugly on social media. So my biggest desire was to try and equip our children with information and tools to get to university and to be able to speak up for themselves. So I was working with schools and with education organisations in America, and actually had travelled to a lot of different places, meeting people, trying to understand what the gaps were in the Australian market. I definitely did not want to be online. I thought I was too old, and no one wants to hear from an old person who is not very good on social media. I had 1,000 followers on social media. They were all personal friends and family. And then after October 7, I still had no desire to be on social media. But on October 9, in Sydney, where I live, there was the incident that happened that night at the Opera House, where the Israeli flag was to be put up on the Opera House in solidarity with Israel and the Jewish community of Australia. And before that event happened, we, as a Jewish community, were all told to stay home. And then on the news, there were all the images of flag burning and whatever was chanted, but I needed some type of avenue for venting. So that was the first time that I had ever put a video online, and that was my why. Just absolute frustration, feeling that everything was very unfair and needing some way to vent to the 1,000 people who I had following me online.
Yeah. Keren?
Hi. That's interesting for me. I didn't know most of that, so that's good to hear. So I guess I've always been an activist in different areas. And I had written an article about Israel and the Australian before, and I have written about disability before, and I do like writing. But my Instagram, originally, my first Instagram post was about interior styling. And at that time, my followers grew and I had a lot of non-Jewish followers. And then I sort of shut that down and turned it into my private page, but I still retained those non-Jewish followers who were strangers. And so when October 7th happened, I felt this very big responsibility that, I know we're all talking to our bubble and we all have Jewish friends that we can, want to share with, but I felt this huge responsibility that I did have some non-Jewish followers, and it was an opportunity to use that. So I chose what I felt I had a skill in. So I like writing, and I had the non-Jewish followers. Other people chose different things, but that's sort of how it started. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Zara.
I guess what made me start this, first and foremost, is my personality, and any person who knows me in this room would vouch for that. I've always been that person since I was a really young child who has been very outspoken, particularly when I perceive there to be any form of injustice, hypocrisy, anything that's basically unfair. And, I started off posting these things to my own personal account, and I just felt like, firstly, I was preaching to the choir, and secondly, I was just screaming into an abyss and achieving absolutely nothing. And I'm one of those people. For me, action is how I cure despair, and I needed to do something, and that's exactly what brought me to starting the Clammy page. And the reason why it's called Clammy Fraud is obviously a play on Clementine Ford's name, because to me, that woman is the poster child of everything that is wrong on social media at the moment. So many heads nodding. I find it really interesting, I can post horrific things from Matt Chun, Randa Fatah, Jewish Council of Australia, all the people I cover, but Clementine Ford never fails to elicit the most triggered responses. And yeah, so my focus has been very much not just speaking out against these people, but actually trying to take action and do something about it. And I'll touch on that more later.
Okay, so now that we've heard the why we all started, we're going to begin with the topic of influence and advocacy. So we're going to start, Dan, I'm going to start with you here. You've written the book, The Why, delving into the quirks of human nature as a behavioural strategist.
Yes.
Yes, good, as long as I'm on the right track here. Right. I'm sure we all share the desire to gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. So with so many social media platforms available, how do you decide which platform is best for telling a particular story, and how do you adapt your message accordingly?
All right. So, I used to be a rapper, so I still can't help it hold. This feels very strange. So, first of all, thank you all so much for coming tonight. And if I could just say, in terms of being on the front line of social media, I feel a bit embarrassed actually to be on the stage with these other three warriors here, who are just so out there and so active, and I'm just sort of a little bit in the background here and there on LinkedIn at events. So thank you all for having me up, even if it's just for gender diversity or in terms of the best platforms, so look, the internet is filled with guides of how to do best practice reels and best practice posting on X and best practice on YouTube. And so rather than indulge you guys with things that you could find with just one quick Google search, my personal experience is that the best kind of content is the content that gets made. And my recommendation is to anybody who is thinking about this is to start with the thing that is easiest, and whether that is long form or short form or photos or video or illustrations or just reposting other people's things, it doesn't matter. What matters is doing something. And the way the whole ecosystem works is that if you pick one and you're good at it, it's going to go everywhere else anyway, because you do the short form things and people will repost it, and then you'll get a journalist who wants to get help write a long form article, and then you'll end up on podcasts, and then you'll end up on a stage like this. And so rather than thinking about what is the absolute objective best way to do it, the best way to do it is just to start and let the momentum go from there. And that was certainly my experience. It was a sort of happy coincidence that I started on LinkedIn as a strange place. I decided in January of this year to go over to Israel, obviously after October 7, where you go every year in July as a family, and it just felt like July was too far away and I had to go sooner, and it was made even more compelling when I found out that my dad's cousin from Kibbutz Nir Oz had been taken as a hostage, and she was released thankfully in that first wave, and I just had to get over there. And I realised I wanted to document what I was doing and seeing, and I had nowhere to do it. And LinkedIn was the platform I'd used for documenting my visits to a big conference, South by Southwest, for 7 years in a row. So that just seemed like the place for me to do long form content, and so I just started there. And a bit like Keren, ended up getting my content in front of lots of non-Jewish people, and only realising when I got back what an impact that it'd have. So I never would have done that from the start. I never would have written a strategy to start on LinkedIn, but I did, and it worked out well, and I encourage you guys to just do the same.
Thanks. Okay. All right, so the next one, we're still talking on influence and advocacy. Keren, like me, you've spent much of your life advocating for inclusion and diversity, particularly in the areas of disability and education. When Simone and I launched J United on October the 14th, we didn't have a clear roadmap of how to make a difference in this space. But we knew we had to create a platform where people could raise their voices in support and awareness of the atrocities of October 7th. The plight of the hostages and the frightening rise in anti-Semitism. You found a way to do this with a balanced, non-political, yet unapologetic approach, and that's truly remarkable. So, starting with Keren, what strategies have you found most effective in raising awareness about anti-Semitism online, particularly in balancing the need to address it without unintentionally amplifying harmful narratives? And how does storytelling play a role in influencing others in this effort?
Thanks. So first of all, I'm on Twitter as well. I don't know, are either of you on Twitter? No. Okay. So Twitter is very different. And I do write different things for the different mediums, is that what you call it? Platforms. Okay, so, but in terms of, for me, I'm not sure that I thought about it straight away, but it has definitely evolved over time for me, from speaking to people who write to me on Instagram or Twitter, and speaking to friends, and really very much from watching Rachel Goldberg Poland. I'm very, very inspired by her. That for my purpose of what I'm trying to do, and I think we all have very different voices and different purposes and cater to those, which I think is really important. But for the purpose of what I'm trying to do, like I look at Rachel Goldberg Poland and I see and I know that she was able to cut through and get through to people who would not necessarily listen otherwise. So first of all, take the extremists that we're talking about. I've just put them to the side, okay? I'm not even trying to, probably learned this at one of Dan's speeches, talks that I went to. I don't even try, I don't engage with them, I don't respond to them, I'm never going to change them, and that's fine, they're just beyond the pale, okay? But I'm talking about, you know, maybe more intelligent people who would be willing to listen, maybe believe that Israel has a right to exist, but are horrified what Israel's doing and think it's a genocide, blah, 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 whatever. I really look at Rachel Goldberg Poland, and I think that the reason she was able to get through to people is because she showed some compassion. And even though I'm sure she's must be very, very angry, she didn't speak in anger, and I'm very, very angry, you know, but I try and temper it or to direct it in a way that I think might open hearts and minds. So even though the talk tonight is called Influence with Chutzpah, I actually specifically don't influence with Chutzpah. So that's kind of very much something I think about every time I post. Then I also think about the Jewish people that are watching, you know, seeing my things, and I feel like all of us are sort of a bit of cheerleaders for the Jewish community as well. Like, that feels like it just comes naturally that what we're feeling is what you're all feeling. Like, we're the same as you. That's what grassroots advocacy is, and I think that's sort of the beauty of it.
Yeah. Do you want to answer that? Thanks.
I guess my way of getting, you know, the information across is through humour, and that's something that's quite new to me. If you asked any person in this room who's known me for quite some time to describe me in 3 words, I can guarantee you not one of them would use humour to describe me. That's something that has come out, you know. Obviously, like, I have a sense of humour and I enjoy the lighter side of life, but this extreme sort of incisive, high level of sarcasm humour that I use personally, because I do influence with Chutzpah, I think, I've learnt about myself that it's a coping mechanism, and what I've found very useful is I get hundreds of messages all the time saying, I can't believe I read what I just read, and snort laughed. And so many people are saying, you know, thank you. So I like to break things down in a way that's not going to leave people miserable, because let's be honest, all the things I post could very easily do that.
I do that.
Do not do that. But yeah, so it's a coping mechanism, and I think it also helps me to be able to put out there the things that I'm putting out there in a way that doesn't leave people feeling miserable. So, yeah.
I love Dan's advice, which is, if we're talking strategy, just to start doing it, because after I posted that first video, which was a 30-second story, it wasn't a reel, and for the next 16 weeks, I kept posting 30-second videos because I did not realise that there was a little button that you could change to post a longer video. That's how little I did.
I still don't know.
And that accidentally, we're going to call that strategy. Something resonated with those 30-second videos because I got 20,000 followers in the first 3 months. There was no planned strategy at all, except just trying to squeeze in as many words as I could into 30 seconds. And a lot has sort of changed over time in terms of trying to grow that platform. I now do a lot more writing, less videos. I'm now a lot more emotive, and that's resonating now with a newer audience. It's sort of picked up a lot more followers since I've started doing that. But I agree that you've just got to start somewhere and then be very aware of the things that are working and change things around accordingly. So I think my strategies, my accidental strategies in the beginning were the 30-second reels. I posted every single day at the same time, and I think that the audience became accustomed to expecting a video at a certain time of day, and then started sort of, some people were waiting for those videos, and then, yeah, I think it was just really, as time has gone on and as this year has panned out and it's become so exhausting for all of us, for every Jewish person in the world and for a lot of non-Jewish people who are watching what's going on in the world, I think I've just started to vent emotionally, and that some of what I am saying, I think, resonates with some people who don't have the words to describe what they're feeling. But in terms of actual strategy, it's just throwing it out there and seeing what sticks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we've got strategies. Our strategies, we're going to go on to content creation. As I'm, well, maybe I'm not, but one of the oldest people on the panel, I know, well, I'm not being offensive when I say that none of us sitting here grew up in a world where social media had the kind of influence it holds today. And we've all said we didn't even know about the buttons. I don't. So for many in our generation, social media and influencers were mostly seen as tools for younger audiences. So navigating these platforms designed for a younger demographic while staying relevant and impactful must be quite a challenge. So how do you create content that resonates with a diverse audience, particularly on platforms where discussions about anti-Semitism may be unfamiliar? And how do you ensure your message remains relevant by staying updated on content, current trends and issues? Start you, should you?
I'll answer the second part of that question first, which is how do I make sure my content is relevant and current? Hours of work. Every day I'm sifting through the news, the information, other content creators, and obviously not reposting everything I see, but curating it. Just obviously you can't post everything you see, otherwise you cause overwhelm and you've got to be quite selective. But yeah, it takes hours and hours of work to sort of sift through everything and then create content that, you know, is digestible by everybody else. And in terms of the relevance, in terms of how to make it relevant to other communities, with me personally, I think it's shocking what's happening to our community, and I think we can't deny the anti-Semitism that's going on, and we can't deny how much we're all impacted by it. But I think we do ourselves a disservice if we just continue to look inwardly within our community. Because of course, first and foremost, we're all Jews, but we're all actually Australians too. And I think once we start seeing ourselves in that way and including all Australians as being subjected to the same problems that we're facing, the attacks on our Australian way of life and just how unsafe social media and the online space has become, I feel that when I'm more inclusive in my messaging, it resonates to a much larger group, with a much larger group of people. And yeah, I think that's really important to continue to focus on that, looking outwardly as well as inwardly.
That's great.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Also, the same thing, particularly on X, formerly Twitter, I definitely see that if I post something that affects all Australians and talk about the Australian way or disruptions that are happening, there are many, many Australians who find that problematic as well. And that definitely resonates with them. So I probably do that more on X than I do on Instagram, just based on who my followers are. And I'm probably more political on X than I am on Instagram, but I've definitely seen, you can see some posts just like go crazy and some don't. And sometimes it's just luck of what time it was or who happened to see it or whatever, but a lot of it is about resonating. But in terms of that as well, if it's about, if someone sees your post and likes it or retweets it, which is what you guys can do to help. Like if you don't want to be creating content yourselves, but you want to see our content out there, like Elon Musk said the other day on Twitter, that the best way to do that is to share someone's post with someone else, and then it just skyrockets. And we'll talk about, I was going to say something, we'll talk about that afterwards, about people's responses, but yeah.
I think first and foremost, it's about being really authentic, and being very consistent in the information that you put out and the way you put that information out. And I never expected, and I haven't attracted a much younger audience. My audience is older, and I'm completely fine with that. The biggest surprise really is how many non-Jewish people are following and listening and messaging me every single day, and that's the most rewarding part, because I agree, we don't want to be speaking in an echo chamber. We all know what's going on in our world. It's really important to get our messages further afield, but the great thing about starting and gaining a platform is that then you do have all of those other opportunities. So I have had opportunities to speak to young people, but not on Instagram, at live events, and I think that's the beauty. You start somewhere and then you get to do podcasts and you get to do events and your audience really grows. So.
Yep, okay, great. Thank you. Dan, it's time to hear from you. You've worked on advertising and creating messaging for brands like Virgin, TAC and Kogan. What are some of the important lessons from advertising that we can bring into the work that we're doing here?
All right. So the first thing, when we're developing ads for people, the first thing is to understand what our role is in the world and in their lives. And for a bit of context, the average Australian adult sees somewhere between 6,500 and 10,000 advertising messages a day, plus all the things they're doing in their life, which is not looking at advertising messages, which I imagine for most of you is quite a lot of other things. So the first bit of context we need to realise is brands are a very small thing. Israel is a very small thing. People are not paying anywhere near the amount of attention that we would like to hope or imagine that they are. And this is exactly the same if you're posting for Israel or the Jewish community, or if you're making ads for a liquid detergent that now has an amazing new lid that lets out more or less than the last lid. Right? People just don't care anywhere near as much as we think they do. And so it's really important to create messaging that is short, that is sharp, that is not over-intellectual. It's really important to try and simplify what we're doing. And the other thing to consider is that, as anybody who's heard me speak about this before, one of the issues that we have, I think, as a community, is that we are the people of the book. We are not the people of the slogan, or the dramatic video, or the captivating photo. We are the people of the book. And so when we are confronted with something, it is our first inclination to go and get evidence and counterfactual information and historical information that disproves whatever these people are saying. And somebody comes at us with something like, okay, I hear your chat, I'll be back in like 2 weeks with all the information. You need to know that that is actually incorrect. Right? And unfortunately, our desire to appeal to people's logical, rational brain is not how the majority of decisions are made. It is not how people make up or change their mind. That is most frequently done based on emotion and quick decisions and consistently repeated messaging over time. So that's what we do with advertising. It's absolutely, I think, what we should all be thinking about when we're creating content here too.
Thank you. Okay. Marnie, you've been incredibly open about addressing the negative comments you receive online. Many of your posts reflect your struggle with feelings of rage and despair and disbelief at the hatred directed toward the Jewish community. You've shared some of the hateful comments you've encountered, and your honesty in expressing your emotions is both raw and deeply heartfelt. How do you handle negative comments or backlash while cultivating a supportive online community that engages in meaningful dialogue and helps amplify your message against anti-Semitism?
I have no problem receiving negative comments from anyone who is a pro-Palestinian supporter. I've had some hideous messages, comments, threats, all kinds of things. I just delete and report. No problem. It does not actually affect me. There's only been one experience in that area that really got to me, and that was because some people are just so sick they'll send you things that are ridiculous. But I would say the negative comments that have affected me the most have come from within the Jewish community, and that's what absolutely gets to me, is when we are going through such a rough time and we can't stand united, at least online. We don't all have to agree, but we actually have to be a united front, and a lot of that comes back to American politics. And there was a specific incident a week or so ago when Rachel and John Hirsch's parents spoke at the Democratic National Convention, and it was the first time I had seen a very large crowd advocate for our hostages. And I made a simple comment that I felt very emotional seeing that, and it became a shitstorm, pardon my language. I mean, it really was crazy, and I was really upset about that. And I think the only way to handle it is just to call it out. It's the only way I can handle it. And it was upsetting because it was Jewish people, and worse than that, there were some fellow advocates that were really ugly. And I think at this point, we just need to stick together.
So I, for some reason, on Instagram, I get no negative comments. I don't know why. But on X, I get shocking, horrible, revolting comments. Don't even go onto X if you don't want to see that. My strategy is to ignore. I actually don't delete it because I want people to see how revolting people are. I think that Australians need, or anyone needs to see that. It's evidence of how we're being treated. So probably the first couple of days when it happened, it did upset me because I'm talking about things about the Holocaust. Yeah. I don't care if they call me a genocide baby killer, Keza, the Barbie genocide killer, whatever. Some hilarious memes about me, photos done of me, I need Botox, those kind of things, whatever. My forehead's too big, I don't know, things I've never heard before. Those things, it doesn't bother me at all. That doesn't bother me at all. But the comments are horrible, but for me personally, they've never gone past social media. So I am aware that there are people who've been doxxed and it's affected their businesses or their livelihood and things like that. My boss is Jewish. It just has not affected anything like that for me. So same as you, not Jewish people. I haven't had Jewish people write not nice things to me, but probably what gets me the most is I'm not worried about extremists. They're going to write horrible things. I have no value for them. And I don't see them in any high esteem that it's going to upset me. When I see sort of more smart, intellectual people who I revere or who I, thought that they were good people, if they question me, I mean, I can have a conversation, I'm not saying, but I do get quite emotional when that happens. Usually it's turned out sort of fine, but I do have, it sort of gets me in the guts. Or if I see people that I know post things, that are upsetting, that does get me. The other thing also that I'm very aware of is my Israeli friends. So I've sort of, they haven't really said things to me, but I've made it, I have kind of explained to them that I see myself as working in sort of diplomacy. And so if I don't always express all the rage and the anger that they're feeling, it's not because I'm not seeing it. And they know I write to them every single day and whatever, but I don't want them to think, like I sort of tone things down a little for my social media, and I want them to know that. So if they were ever to tell me that they were offended or question something, which has probably happened maybe like once about something, that really upset me. But the extremists, honestly, couldn't care less.
With that, I've had a really different experience. So obviously I have been doxxed repeatedly. Clementine Ford and Constance Hall started doing that in December, 10 days after I started the Clammy Fraud page. Between the two of them, they have almost 1 million followers, and the onslaught was full on and deliberately targeted my business and my livelihood. Even when I got here today, I've got a message from my business partner. We just released new shoes called Z Boots, and Clementine Ford wrote on the ad, "Does the Z stand for Zionist?" she's relentless.
Does she know your name, Zara?
Of course she does. Yeah, she definitely knows my name. So yeah, this is just constant, and it is deliberately targeting my livelihood. We've had thousands of messages, death threats. They write on our ads. They've contacted our stockists. They've gone to town. But for me, how I've handled it is by treating it as data collection. And what I mean by that is I'm setting up an organisation called Digital Defence, which has the aim of overhauling the whole online space in Australia, because honestly, all of our experiences and all of yours, I'm sure, show that we have no online safety. So having been through the system myself, having gone to law enforcement, having gone to the e-safety commissioner, having seen how broken our system is, and through running my page being privy to hundreds of people who've had the same experience, it's given me the ability to see firsthand what needs to be fixed and how to do it. So we've been working on legislative amendments with various government departments, and there's a lot of things that we're now putting forward, and we can do that because I've had that experience and I'm connected to others who have. So that has helped me very much to cope with the stress of the constant attacks against me and my business.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Well, those answers just answered all my next question. So we'll be quicker now. The next, so I'll go and move straight to Dan here. With the rise of algorithms that reinforce our existing beliefs, how do you think people can avoid falling into the echo chambers and rabbit holes that social media can create?
Oh, no, easy one.
Is it? Okay. No, go on social media.
Social media.
And you're welcome to answer to
Great. I mean, look, this is a huge problem for our generation. I mean, for every generation. We talk about these as being platforms for young people, but look at the room, like everybody here is on social media. Other than some things I've learned from the world of behavioural science, which I'll share a couple in a second, the other thing is just to consider that when we try to get off these platforms, when we try to stop scrolling and go outside and do something with our times, there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of the world's smartest people trying to keep us on there. And it is understandable that for doing so is sort of beyond the reach of most of us as individuals. I mean, the whole system is designed to keep hitting our brains with dopamine and to keep us on there. So the first thing is to not beat ourselves up too badly that we're having trouble putting these things down, because that's exactly what they're designed to do, and that's exactly why there are billionaires running these platforms, because they've done an incredible job of it, for better or worse. In terms of shaping our own decision making, probably the best piece of advice that I can give is that when it comes to shaping our own behaviour, the most effective things we can do are where we put in hard lines for ourselves. So we are not very good with grey zones. We tend to give ourselves lots of affordance that we otherwise wouldn't. So if we talk about this in a non-social media context, we just decide we want to eat better. You know, lots of grey would be to say, I'm just going to try to eat really healthy, and when we go out, I'm just going to try and order the healthy things on the menu. Right? That's mainly grey, right? And we let ourselves do lots of things, like order things that are called bread that are actually cake, or order salads that are actually not very healthy at all. And it's the same thing, with social media. Just to finish the food example, if we say, look, I'm just not going to eat any deep fried food and no desserts 6 days a week. It's a hard line, it's easy to understand when we're over the line or under the line. So bringing it back to social media, when we try and say I'm going to try to limit myself, or I'm going to try and only use it when I'm on the way to work, it's really hard. A much better thing is to limit yourself to one platform, or 2 platforms, or 3 days, or 5 days, or 6 days a week, or only between these certain hours, or only when I'm on the treadmill. Things where you can't give yourself leeway to cheat yourself. Other than that, good luck everybody, it's very difficult.
Does anyone else want to? Yeah.
In terms of trying to break out of our echo chambers online, which is really hard to do. I think it's also about going back to just using online to get a platform to begin with, and then taking your work offline to get outside of the echo chamber. So the fact that I've been doing this work has allowed me to start setting up an organisation that is going to do grassroots education offline in the non-Jewish community. And it's a dinner party idea where 10 Jewish people invite 10 non-Jewish people for dinner parties. We've all come from somewhere in this country, so we all introduce ourselves and we talk about where we've come from, and we just break down stereotypes and barriers. And I think really we have to not rely on social media to break out of our echo chamber, because everything is stacked against us.
Yeah. Sorry, can I say one little thing just on the echo chambers? Sorry.
So I just one little thing on the echo chambers, and I think this is a brilliant idea. I'd love to come to one of these dinners if I may. But also, we shouldn't beat ourselves up too much about just talking to the echo chambers and just preaching to the choir. You have to preach to the choir if you want the choir to sing, right? And like I'm sure many people in this room, I've been involved with Jewish organisations for most of my adult life, from Maccabi and Orgus and JNF, and up until 11 months ago, the single biggest issue in every Jewish organisation I worked with for the last, call it 25 years, has been apathy. We just could not get people involved. And so now we have this problem that all we're doing is talking to the 1,000 family and friends, who follow us on social media and who are interested in this stuff. And it's important, we need to be there for each other. And I love seeing your content come up in my newsfeed, even though I'm in your echo chamber, because it inspires me and it emboldens me and it gives me courage to go out and do the same. So yes, we need to get beyond it, but it's good too.
So just on that, I just wanted to add that my original goal was to reach non-Jewish people, but very quickly I have people come up to me on the street or write to me on Instagram, and particularly people from Israel, and it fills my cup when they thank me, because it makes them know that we're thinking of them, or it makes other Jewish people know that they feel connected to each other. And that wasn't an intentional goal, but now I'm very aware of that. And honestly, if someone called me from Israel the other night, a friend from someone in Israel, to tell me that the friend wanted to tell me how much it means to them that they see my content and they feel heard and loved and cared for, and that we're standing up for them. So yes, that's really, really important as well.
Okay, thank you. I think that brings us almost to our last question before we open it up to the floor. And the question is, what advice would you each give to those who want to start influencing in this space but are concerned by potential backlash?
Okay, so first of all, the obvious one is resilience. So, the mark of successful advocacy is rubbing people up the wrong way. So that's what's going to happen. You're doing a good job when many people hate you and you've got a target on your back. So if you're not okay with that, it's not for you, and that's okay, because this really is not for everyone. It's not. But I think the best piece of advice I can give is, you're going to be dealing with some pretty awful people. You're going to be coming across and reading some pretty disgusting things, and it's really hard not to be brought down to that level. And I think what we all need to focus on is not getting personal. So what I always am really strict about is focusing on the content rather than the person. In running the Clammy Fraud page, I can't tell you how many people have sent me really personal details about the people I cover, embarrassing pictures, details of their kids, addresses, you name it. I delete it straight away. I would never go in that direction. I would never post personal things about these people, you always have to separate the content you're criticising from the person. And that gives you greater credibility. And I think what we're trying to do is to tell our truth, to tell the truth, and that involves critical thinking. So don't just post and repost everything you see. It's our job to make sure that what we're posting is factual, not just that it supports the narrative that we have, because then we're just spreading misinformation like the other side do. So stick to facts and don't keep it, don't go personal. That would be my biggest advice.
Thank you.
So firstly, the thing I tell myself every time someone writes something horrible on X to me is that they've just made 1,000 more people see my post. So I'm like, great, thank you. The number one rule, if you don't like someone's post, don't start commenting and sharing it all the time, because people are seeing it then. So I sort of go, okay, great, I'm going to take that as a positive. You've got to be strong. If you're not strong, as you said, it's probably not for you, and that's okay. There are so many people come and thank me, for doing all this. There are people doing so much more work. They're just not, they don't have their name out there, they're not at the front face kind of thing. If you're good at designing posters, help with that. If you're good at photography, help with that. If you're a lawyer, there are a million things you can do with that. It doesn't have to be on social media. So if it really scares you and it really bothers you, then find something else to do. So, but if you want to do it, if you put your wall up and just decide I'm not going to let this go in, if you're lucky like I am, it hasn't gone further. It just doesn't bother me.
I agree, if you want to get into advocacy, that there are many, many ways to be an advocate. You don't always have to be online, but if you've decided you're going to speak out online, I think the thing to do is to not think about it a lot and assume no one is actually watching or listening, because then, and that's really what I was doing. I really assumed in the beginning that no one gave a stuff what I had to say. I didn't even think about it. It took me a long time to realise anybody was watching. And to really decide that when you get the negative comments and the feedback, that you are literally just going to let it wash over you, and that you are there to do a job, and the job that we are here to do, which is to advocate for the Jewish people and for Israel, is much more important than having to deal with any negative feedback that you're getting online.
So does that mean that you just ignore the feedback, or let it, the negative comments?
I try very hard just to let it
play over your head.
Unless it's from fellow Jewish people, and then I get really angry.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that one. All right, before we go to questions, I've got one more to go. Dan, what advice would you give to young creatives and entrepreneurs navigating the current social media landscape, particularly in terms of building a brand or message that resonates without contributing to toxicity online?
So to finish up where we started, I think the most important thing is just to start. I was lucky to work on a really interesting research project with Google a couple of years ago that looked at what influences people's decision makings. And this study looked at hundreds of thousands of customer journeys over a 2-year period. And one of the most interesting things I saw out of this research that we worked on was the importance of just turning up, the importance of just being there. Thousands and thousands of people were asked for their first and second brand preference. So what's your favourite brand in this category? What's your second favourite brand in this category? And were then presented with a simulation to purchase one of these brands. 30% of people picked their second choice. Now this makes no sense. Right? It's like 100 people tell you chocolate's their favourite flavour of ice cream, and then you give those 100 people chocolate or strawberry, and 30 of them choose strawberry. Right? Just turning up gets you votes. Right? So it's so important to just turn up. You don't know who's going to see it. The second thing, which I think the guys on this panel do an incredible job of, is about consistency. Right? Because we see up to 10,000 messages a day, and because most people aren't really paying attention, there's a phenomenon called the mere exposure effect, and that is the more frequently we are exposed to something, the more likely we are to find it favourable, and this is why brands have these things called distinctive assets, right? The 4 or 5 things that every big brand has that you know instantly from half a second what brand that is. It's the Coca-Cola red and the script and the word Coca-Cola in the shape of the bottle. It's the Tiffany blue and the box and the typography that says Tiffany & Co. It's the purple squiggle. This was amazing. I don't know who was following this up. I saw a Lengy post last week. Do you want
It's number one now.
But your purple squiggle,
Yep.
people see the squiggle and they know that's your purple squiggle, right? Your posts, right? When I don't even need to read it because I see it come up in my feed and I say, Marnie's at it again, right? It's either the piece to camera or the blue and white, all text. So in advertising world, we call these things distinctive brand assets. And they are the things that let people know instantly who this content is from. And so number 1 is just start, and number 2 is just keep turning up, and you never know what's going to happen.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to? Okay. All right, well, that's the end of the formal questions. And now we're going to open it up to you. But just a reminder, just to be succinct, given this is a Jewish event, we do tend to love the sound of our voices. So please try and, like I tell my students, make sure it's a question, not a whole Guns and Megillah, and just make it a short question. That way it'll be easier for everyone to follow. Okay. Put your hand up if you've got a question.
Thank you. Now, what I'd like to do is people that want to ask a question, if you could come to the front and line up on this side, because we've only got one mic that has to be used from the front as well.
You might need a runner.
And we'll see what we can do to help you. But at the same time, can I ask the following? Please, quiet.
1, 2, 3.
15 seconds, that's your question. I'll chop you off. 2, please state your name. From that, good luck, 30 minutes.
Thank you. Congratulations to you all. Thank you very much for tonight. My question is to you, Zara. You're posting a lot about the Clementine Forwards of those people, getting a lot of government grants. Can you speak a little bit about the amount of money they're getting and the panels that are giving them that money?
Yep.
You didn't say his name.
Didn't say your name, but we'll get you next time.
So what actually started me on that was early on after I started the page, I was covering Clementine Ford and a few of these characters, and I noticed she received a grant from Create New South Wales to make a series about killing men. Okay, so...
That's reasonable.
Yeah, great. Amazing. I'm so glad my taxpayer money's funding that. But anyway, it started me looking at, hang on a sec, I remember that Matt Chun also gets a lot of grants. And then I started to look at, and then, you know, we got news that Randa Fatah got a $806,000 grant to write an essay on Arab social justice. And it just, I started looking into it, and I started to see the connections between these people and the extent to which there is an incredible amount of corruption and nepotism in the grant space, particularly in the creative New South Wales areas. And I don't even want to tell you how much these people are getting. I don't even want to go into that, because it actually started a whole group of us researching that, because another problem that we're seeing is once they get the grant, there's no audit process, there's no KPIs, there's no, you know, Matt Chun's partner, Tess Cullity, started a publishing company to get revenge against the Jewish publisher she used to work for called Slingshot Books. She publishes all of Matt Chun's works and his Sunday paper with pictures of terrorists at the front. Her mission statement is, we will never collaborate with Zionists or sell or promote through Zionist channels. She got a grant from Victoria, from the Victorian government. And I can tell you, I went back and forth with the Australian human, because Victoria is we're a human rights charter state. She operates in Victoria, which means what she's saying is actually in breach of the Victorian Human Rights Charter. I dealt with the Australian Human Rights Commission, the Equal Opportunity, every commission, nothing. Nobody's doing anything about it. So it's a really big problem, but I can assure you that there are a team of people we're looking into it and we're working on it, and I don't know where it'll go, because the truth of the matter is this is a very small portion of the corruption. I think there are very many billions of dollars that are going to places they shouldn't be going, and all I can say is it's being looked into, and yeah.
Do I have to say my name? My name's Vanessa. I'm from my father's family were Palestinian Jews. It's not an oxymoronic term. They've been there for thousands and thousands of years in Jerusalem, and there's so many Jews that are indigenous to Palestine. Why is this not brought up? Like, why do we not talk about the Palestinian Jews?
Marnie, thank you.
It's a great question, and I'm not sure that I'm qualified to answer it. It may be because we just don't have enough understanding of Palestinian Jews, and it may be because there are, I don't know how many there are.
There are thousands of us, and this narrative has always been presented of European Jewry and Ashkenazi Jewry, and as soon as I get into an argument with someone and I tell them about my family's provenance in Jerusalem and how long over there, it shuts them down.
So I think there are people like Ben Freeman, who is a Jewish author, who is releasing a book next year about this topic and about all the different groups that are indigenous to the land, and I think that there are advocates and educators who are trying very, very hard to get these kind of messages across, but it's happening more with grassroots education. It's not something that is, I mean, let's be honest, it's not something that gets you the most clicks on social media. So there are things that are much more likely to go viral, things that are like news stories, things that have happened recently. It doesn't mean that it shouldn't be talked about, but it's just not being talked about as much as other things. But it's an incredibly important part of our story. It's an important part of our narrative. We've just got to find a way to amplify that more, and it's a great question. Thank you.
Smart.
Just to answer you, I also know that the Sephardi Shore is working on something at the moment. The Sephardi Shore is working on something at the moment as well.
Fantastic. I'm happy to.
Michael Kosminski, and just for that last point too, Elon Levy, I think, is an Iranian Jew. For the panel, what strategies, if any, do you have to minimise the amount of doxing you get? I personally look at anyone who wants to befriend me or follow me, and if they haven't got an extensive Facebook account, I just ignore them. Are there any other strategies you have to minimise doxing?
The answer is no. I don't try to prevent people from doxing me. Everything I say, when the people I'm criticising, I'm well aware that they're going to dox me in response. So my only way personally to avoid that would be to stop my page, and believe me, they've tried. For 24 hours before the first time they doxed me, they were harassing my business partner incessantly, telling her to get me to stop or else they would end our business. So as I said before though, every time it happens, I use it as an opportunity to collect data and to funnel it towards activities and advocacy that are going to bring about changes where people will not be able to dox people anymore. That's what we want to see happen. At the moment, it's happening all the time. I'm not sure if you're aware, there's currently anti-doxing legislation being drafted. It's going to be moved to Parliament really soon. If I'm 100% honest with you, I'm cautious about it because we already have laws that make this conduct illegal. In the criminal code, there's a section which prohibits someone from using a carriage service, so a social media platform, to menace, harass and intimidate. I went to the police with that. They didn't care. They actually didn't even know what it is. So the risk that we face is when this new anti-doxing legislation is brought out, it's just another law that exists, and then what? And that's exactly what my organisation is going to be focusing on. The and then what? Where do people go when it happens? And how do we actually finally get the Australian government and law enforcement to enforce the laws that we have?
Hello, thank you very much. My name's Alex, and thank you to all of you. Dan spoke about people in the book, and Zara, I think you mentioned facts. So my question is, how much time do you spend on speaking to people about what they tell you and talking about the facts, and how much of what you say is emotion, and how much do you think should be?
Well, I can give you, I guess, an advertising answer, then maybe you guys will have some more first-hand experience with this. I think that the facts are always a really important thing to underpin what you're saying, but long, dry explanations are not going to convince people, and it's about having good emotional stories or poignant emotional stories that, if challenged, you can underpin or extrapolate with facts. So I use them sort of as a support rather than the lead.
My approach to that is really simple. You know, Clementine Ford will put something up like, I don't believe for a second that Hamas killed those hostages. So I'll just put a purple squiggle around it and go, Clementine Ford doesn't believe for a second. So when you repeat it in that way, it actually shows how ridiculous it is. And that post obviously went viral because it just simply showed, when I put it in my voice going, Clementine Ford doesn't believe, it just shows how ridiculous it is. So sometimes, like you say, that very simple, cutting, I'm not going to start writing a Megillah arguing why Hamas did it and Israel didn't do it, and it's not going to go anywhere, but, you know, sort of flipping it back and finding a very simple way to make it look as ridiculous as it is, I think is the effective way to deal with it. I don't know if you guys...
I think that unfortunately we have at our fingertips very emotional content. So we have 101 hostages in Gaza, and nothing is going to pull at people's heartstrings as seeing the stories of them and their families. So very early on, one of my non-Jewish friends, who she's actually become a much better friend through all this, even though we disagree on things, but through our conversations, she said to me, like, do more of that. Like, that is what people are going to see and be drawn to. So just, it's there. So I think we have to use the stories.
I have two forms of posting. One is videos which relate more to facts and things that have happened, you know, in real time, and my emotive posts are more written. But I can tell you that for 11 months I literally have not slept. I spend my entire life on my phone because I get hundreds of messages with people wanting to tell me things that they know firsthand, and I try and get through as many of those messages as possible. I'm up in the middle of the night watching the news. I don't always get it right, but I can tell you that I feel a great responsibility to, even if it's an emotive post, to have that based on fact and to check what I'm talking about and what I'm saying, and to try and understand every part of that, and it requires a lot of time and a lot of effort.
Can I just add one little thing?
Just to acknowledge, I think that the thing that's also tough for us as a people is we don't like to portray ourselves as victims and helpless. And so yes, like, we do have 101 hostages and 1,200 people that were murdered on the day that we have, you know, if you wanted content, we have unlimited content, but so much of it is not in our nature. And I think something that I found worked for me, and I've seen that works for you guys as well, is when we post our own stories and how we're feeling and what we're experiencing, it's authentic and it's not necessarily portraying us as victims, and it's hard for people to argue with our own lived experiences.
Hi, I'm Justine Pearl. I'm a big admirer of each of you, and I've spoken to each of you online. Like each of you, I spend far too much time online, and sometimes I fantasize about what will happen after this and what we'll do with our platform and who we've been talking to. And I'd love to hear from each of you what you would like to do with your platform. We've heard from Zara a bit about this. I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Firstly, hi Justine, and thank you. It's actually really nice to, I know that you've been commenting and we've been chatting online. It's nice to see you. Part of me dreams about the day where I have zero platform and that the world just instantly, somehow miraculously fixes itself and I can go back to my normal life. But realistically, I think that my platform will be still trying to introduce non-Jewish Australians to Jewish Australians, because if you consider that we make up only 0.5% of the Australian population, you have to assume that most non-Jewish people have not met a Jewish person. So I think this dinner party idea will hopefully grow, and it's something that I've been speaking to a lot of advocates internationally about, and we're trying to roll it out internationally, so I hope that will take off. And the other thing I'm trying to do is, through a couple of weeks ago, judged the Mikalot program, which was a public speaking program for young year 10 to 12 students, and it was the 7 finalists were unbelievable, but basically the kids, they have an opportunity to speak, they get into the finals, and then it's like see you later. So we're now working on an advocacy program to keep those kids engaged. So I hope that my platform will lead to influencing and motivating young Jewish people to advocate in the future.
So that question reminds me again a little bit of Rachel Goldberg-Poland when she said that she hopes that her sticky tape, one day she'll be able to start just using it as sticky tape and not counting the days that her son was held hostage and is no longer alive. I would like to just go back to putting pictures of my holidays. But I mean, I've been an advocate in other ways, so I assume it will continue, but I think we're going to be in this for a very long time, so we're not going anywhere. Yeah, we're just going to keep doing it.
As I sort of think about what the coming years and things will be, for me, like what I want to do in my capacity in the industry that I'm in, I'm really interested in getting more people to visit Israel, both from inside our community and from outside. I feel like it's binary. If you've been there, you understand, and if you've never been, you just never will. And so I'm just sort of casting my mind forward a couple of years and thinking about, how I can use my position and my influence to bring more and more Australians to experience the incredible country of Israel.
Hi, I'm Julia Gershon, and I'm a huge admirer of your work. I've developed multiple online personalities myself across different platforms, and I'm trying to keep track of them, but obviously not as good as you guys. My question is, what message would you have for our big bodies? What gap is left in amongst what you guys are messaging? And what is left? I noticed TikTok is absent, so it's kind of a two-part question.
Are you talking about the peak Jewish organisations? Yep. My message would be they need to have a better understanding of social media. I don't think we as a community were prepared in any way. And even until recently, often when I bring up the issues that we see, being on the ground every day, we're met with people from Jewish organisations who say things like, it's just social media, it's not reality, and the solution is to get off social media. I mean, put your hand up if you think that's the correct advice. None of you are putting your hand up, that's obvious. So I basically, what I'm trying to say is I think as a community, we need to invest more into understanding the social media landscape and into supporting people such as ourselves and organisations who are working tirelessly to make that a safer place, because I don't know, I'm going to make a bold statement. Social media is the epicentre of all the anti-Semitism that we're seeing.
I think that the roof bodies have to stop being so diplomatic when it comes to our government and stop trying to get along so nicely and play nicely. I think Jews have a history of being very, very polite, and it really upsets me that our roof bodies are not placing more pressure on the government to make some real changes. And I actually think that they're failing us in that way, and I'm sorry if there are any representatives here.
I'm going to make a bold statement and disagree.
Okay.
I think they're doing a lot behind the scenes that we don't always know, and I think it's important that. But I think that sometimes, you know, when this is going to be a very bad example, okay, but I'm going to give it anyway. When Israel went in to Gaza to get their hostages, and then on an interview afterwards, they were asked, why didn't you give warning? Why didn't you give the details before? And the answer was, because when you do that, you give away what's happening. I do think that there are a lot of things, I know that there are a lot of legal things going on behind the scenes. I speak to them and I do know that they're doing stuff. That doesn't mean they're perfect, I'm not saying they're doing a perfect job, but I think we have to realise that not everything can be spoken about publicly and told publicly. And also, I think that the peak organisations have a very different role to us in that they have to be diplomatic and they're thinking about the long-term future. And I think that, so say for example, the Labor government is in power, right? They cannot completely, can I say piss off the Labor government?
Not completely.
No, and I know that I've spoken to them, yes, and I think they have to choose when and how to do it. And so I don't think it's as simple, and I think there is strategy behind what they're doing, personally. That's what I think. And I have actually heard from non-Jewish people that they actually think they do it really well because, again, people listen to what they have to say because they speak in a certain way. But that's just my opinion. I know others disagree, but I just don't think it's that simple.
Should be more Jews on TV relating all our information.
They have to be given a platform.
Yeah.
I think every newspaper article that you see, by the way, someone from the Jewish community has fed that information.
I'm not completely dissing them. I know we could. I don't want to start a whole debate about it, and I'm not completely dissing the organisations. I know they're working very, very hard. I know they're working with very limited resources, and I know that they're understaffed. There's no way they could have predicted what they would have had to deal with this year. But I also feel that they are very, very diplomatic. And I know how much is going on behind the scenes, but I still think that we have not been able to achieve enough as a community in this country in the last 11 months. What's been going on and is still going on at university level, with some of the government decisions, with the protests in the streets, I just really believe, and I'm not blaming the Jewish organisations for that, but I do think that there hasn't been enough pressure put on the government by all of us.
Wary of time, we might have 2 or 3 more questions.
Hi, my name is Melinda Jones. I actually want to make a statement in response to the comment about Palestinian longevity of Jews living in the land of Israel. And this is one of the places where social media isn't particularly useful, but there are other places that are, I think, and this is what we really need to look at in terms of advocacy. We have an opportunity in Australia, every time someone has to stand up and give a welcome to country, to say, we talk about the Indigenous people of Australia, we also can say, and as a Jew, we are Indigenous to the land of Israel. That needs to be said every time, and that way we make a difference.
Hi, I'm Eliana David, and social media is like for young people like my age, but if you see the crowd, no one here is my age, and how do you change that? Like how?
You have to answer that question. Yeah. Tell us. TikTok.
But like how do you get to the young people by like being social media young people?
You need to do that.
You know, it's by actually grassroots working with young people to inspire, encourage and motivate them to do this. I think there are young people doing this. I think they're probably on different platforms to us. I think they're on TikTok, you know. You do attract your own age. And I hope that there'll be more. There are not enough, but hopefully if we can create programs, if we can motivate people, if there's support
for advocacy in our community, then hopefully it will improve.
I was going to say, my kids are in the audience. When I hear them saying skippity, alpha, omega, I don't understand their language, and I think you're right. I think there's a gap in the market. If my kids follow my page, they get it because they get me, but I don't think most kids their age would be like reading my stuff and it wouldn't resonate with them. So I think you're 100% onto something, that there could be an open, like a gap in the market for us to explore how we can get our voice heard that's generationally appropriate for, you know, the younger crew.
Hi guys, stand up. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. My name is Jamie Mazaro. I think the whole community, or the whole Jewish community almost around the world, has been reeling since October 7. My question to all of you is advocating and sharing 30-second stories and content and posts helping you emotionally?
I love that question. People always ask me, how do you deal with the stuff that you're seeing on a daily basis? How do you deal with that? And I think you guys will all agree, what we do is really high-level stress work. It's really stressful, but at the same time, what I do is my therapy. So it's that balance, you know, and there are some days where it's not balanced, there are some days where it's too much, and I feel like a shell of a human being, and I'm reading things off a menu and I burst out crying, and I don't know why, because I'm exhausted and it's just crazy. But for the most part, I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's also my therapy. It's how I process my thoughts. And, you know, the silver lining in all of this for me personally has been the connection with the community. I have never felt, I've always been very connected to the Jewish community, but this is a whole new level. And that for me is a big therapy as well.
Yeah, exactly the same. I feel like I'm getting to write a journal, and just, like Zara said earlier, I've also always been a bit of a big mouth and like to say what I think, and I get to say whatever I think, and that's fantastic. So I feel like I'm venting, and I get to give my opinion, and I feel like I'm doing something. And as Aviva Klompus, if you don't follow her, you should follow her, on her podcast she said that X or Instagram, they're like the town square, and so we get to go into the town square and shout out what we think, and I would be much more miserable if I didn't get to do that.
It's a great question. I was a very private person before October 7, and I had always wanted to be a journalist and decided not to write for the very reason that I never wanted people to know what I was really thinking. So at the moment I'm writing an essay called "I'm Not the Same Person I Was a Year Ago, I'm Much Worse." So, you know, initially I did think it was therapeutic and it was great therapy, but I don't think any of us ever imagined that we would be doing this in such a way for this long. So I do feel at the moment, I feel like, especially in the last week, it's been super draining, and I do really struggle with a lot of it. I think we all do, and I think that, you know, we do have to really balance it. I don't feel I've got it in balance at the moment, but hopefully that will come.
One day.
One day.
But I think we'd be struggling, and like we're struggling with what's happening. I'm not, do you know what I'm saying? So
100%, we will be struggling anyway.
And to your point, like, I also think that when somebody approaches you and says that you've made a difference, or that you've put words to how they were feeling, or that you've taught them something they didn't know, that is really, really rewarding, and the connection as well. And my online audience actually is only 17% Australian, it's 50% American, it's British, Canadian, Israeli. So I have the added real bonus of having made a global connections, which has been really special.
That's the end of the questions. Yep, did you?
I'm not doing the official close, but thank you guys. You guys have been incredible. There is going to be an official thank you, so no need to clap. I just want to say that each and every one of you have asked incredible questions about how to engage the next generation, what do we need to do. Please, everybody, on your seat, there was a flyer. And next Sunday in 1 week, we're running with Stand With Us, we're running a 4-hour workshop on exactly how to engage. So if you like, it's a continuation of today's workshop. Please come. It is targeted for young people, but everybody is young at heart. And we love you and thank you so much. Look at all the events that are coming up at YJP. Get involved, get inspired, get engaged, and it gives me great honor to call Robert Glasman to formally close.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Khan. And I think that what we've learned tonight is so critical in terms of finding the language and the techniques. And as the panelists themselves said, not everyone is necessarily cut out for that type of work, but those of us who are, it would be awesome to join, I guess, the army, the social media warriors. So, kol hakavod. It was also mentioned that those who don't necessarily do the front line stuff, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. So I just want to very quickly acknowledge, firstly, Mendy Rimla from the Jewish Multimedia Library, who's streaming this whole thing and making sure that it's all on record. I want to thank our honorary photographer, Dale. Where's that? Dale Williams. So Dale, you mentioned earlier, Dale's not actually of the Jewish faith, but an absolute lover of Israel and of the Jewish community. I have to say that Dale has become very attached to, thank God, to the St Kilda Shul. He comes to Shul more often than most of our members. So it's wonderful to have you here. Good on you. I shouldn't have said that. There's a couple of past presidents in the room, but they're regulars as well. And I wanted to thank the three co-hosts, which are J United, headed by Simon and Jackie, and your team. And I was very privileged to get to know Simon a couple of years ago and her family, because I got to be bar mitzvah her son Ashton. Good to see you back, mate. Well done. And also, of course, YJP with Rabbi Moshe Khan and Dina Khan. And not only is Moshe a good mate of mine, but I have to give credit where it's due. Many of you saw this media wall coming in called Sky, St Kilda Young Adults. It's about 1 hour old. This is like the first event that we've co-hosted, and we've attracted all ages, which is great. But on Thursday, we're doing a partnership session with Orges Chalabek in memory of the hostages who have been killed in Gaza, tragically. So the reason I'm mentioning it now is because Moshe Khan and Dina, who's also here, were actually the first shul to create a platform exclusively for young adults called YJP. And then after they did that and really pioneered it and spearheaded it, everyone else jumped on the bandwagon, the Chabads and the South Caulfield Shul and Caulfield. So we're just the last one to jump on the bandwagon. Not the last as in there'll be plenty after, but the most recent one. So thank you for that, Moshe, for your leadership. Now finally, to our actual panelists. Jackie, thank you for your incredible moderating. You did a great job. And to each of our panelists, to Marnie, to Keren, to Zara, and to Dan, you guys did an awesome job. Thank you so much. We've got lovely gifts. The gifts for all but Dan come from Mecca. And I have to say, it was only last week when I bat mitzvahed a young girl and had a chat with her to learn things about her before giving the sermon that I discovered Mecca is not just a city in Saudi Arabia.